Hey everybody, welcome to Age of Reason. Today with me is Luke.
Hello.
This is the last show of the year. I have to use the rest of the month and next month to finish off my book that I mentioned. I think it's getting done, so you'll probably see a campaign for it. Please support. It's a great story. It's very short too, so I don't like to bore people with like thousands of pages. Hey, we had the Bible for that.
Yes, of course. Yes.
So a lot of people talk about North Korea, and I definitely don't have a good answer. Because, you know, if America strikes first, they're going to strike somebody. It's inevitable, really.
Yeah.
So somebody's going to die.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the best way to deal with it?
The solution to North Korea, I mean, I don't think there is any real solution unless you just accept that they're a nuclear power now and trying to get them to join a nuclear community, perhaps, and agree to not attack people and to not expand their nuclear arsenal. Like places like Pakistan, you know, they're crazy kind of nations. They have nuclear powers, and there's a nuclear war that's possible between Pakistan and India. That hasn't happened yet. So
is China, by the way. They also have nukes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I think maybe Trump is going to give South Korea and Japan a bunch of nuclear weapons. So you just have like a nuclear race in the Southeast Asia. I mean, what can you do?
Yeah, we're going to talk about Japanese politics a little bit later, and one thing people have to understand here is that Japan is trying to change its constitution in order to allow, first of all, Japan has an army right now.
Yeah.
So they're called the peacekeepers.
Having a full-scale offensive army, I don't really know what the difference is between defense and offense, and you're probably still using the same equipment, and you still have tanks, and you still have planes and whatnot.
Jets and all that. Yeah. Germany has an army, so
Germany has an army. I mean,
they haven't invaded anybody since '45, I think.
No, they've been really well behaved since then.
We're going to start with genocide. Oh, that's part of the Bible all the time. Then we're going to talk about talking animals, and then we're going to finish off with female subjugation, which is again, if you really want to, in a nutshell, explain the Bible to people, this is it.
Yeah.
Genocide, talking animals, subjugation of women,
and. That covers everything, I think, yeah. But the Lord said to Moses, "Do not fear him, for I have given him into your hand, and all his people and his land. And you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon." So they defeated him and his sons and all the people until he had no survivors left, and they possessed his land. It's so cavalier in a way. When you talk about the murder of him and his sons and all of his people, I mean, that's a scorched earth policy. Not only will I defeat you, but I will defeat your lineage. And all of his people is his army or his citizens as well.
You know that an army will never fight to the last man.
Yeah.
It never happens.
Yeah.
An army will lose maybe like 30% of people, and then what happens is that panic sets in and they run away. There is no way that you can, unless you literally purposely hunt every single person down after the battle, there's no way it's real. So
you know, you're rounding up people on the battlefield and executing them. This reminds me of kind of like the way ISIS operates. They will, if you retreat, you will be executed. Right. You have to fight to the death.
Yeah.
And I think that this sort of this act has two different meanings. It kind of makes your opponents wanting to fight to the death, but it's also about this keeping the bloodlines pure. Jewish philosophy is about the Jewish people being the children of the kings, and their bloodline is from God, and so this kind of genocide, this sort of ethnic cleansing, goes hand in hand with their philosophy of a superior race. It's similar to white supremacy. They believe that they have pure blood, and that all other blood types are inferior, and you see the result of this in the Holocaust. You saw people who thought that when you delineate a lower class of people, you have genocide.
This is God. This is a supreme creature. Exactly. He has supposedly all the power in the world. Why does he need to put people through the fights.
Any war at all.
Can't he just remove the enemies
Certainly.
magically, or like the earth swallows people up? I think we covered that in Leviticus or something. So that happened. Well, that happened in the Bible.
Yeah.
Not in real life.
even in this fantasy fiction, that it's canon that God is able to perform those acts. But this is real Bronze Age mentality to sort of think of God and higher states of being as a sort of petty tribalism where one side wins over another side. It's very, very small way of thinking, very, very Bronze Age mentality.
Yeah.
You can see
Warlords.
the fingerprints. Warlords fighting each other.
Yeah.
This has the fingerprints of the authors all over it, and it's these kind of passages that really show you what the Bible really is. It is written by smart people, but living in the Bronze Age.
Yeah. So when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he struck the donkey with his staff. Well, that's violence right there. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey. I wonder how that happens. This particular version of the Bible that I have is in two pages, and each page has two columns of text. I love to show this page to religious people because on one side you have genocide, and on the other part you have talking animals.
Yes.
So when it's not convenient for them, it's a metaphor.
Yes, yeah. I love, I have a visual arts background, so I love, art, and I love poetry and free expression. And so mythology for me is really interesting, psychologically interesting, and narratively, if this is all like a type of poetry. But as you say, just on the page before that, you have like some strange verbal history categorizing and listing of war crimes, essentially, and these barbaric practices, and we'll see later on some unethical laws and stuff, all mixed together with this sort of strange, bizarre, odd poetry, and the concoction is bizarre, to say the least, especially in this layout where you see them side by side. You can talk about the archaeology of the Bible and the history of the Bible, and people have tried to sort of match up places and dates, and none of it's really sort of shakes out. So this is a very skewed history from one tribe against another history of the region, because I imagine in the region people like the Canaanites and that sort of stuff were just wiped out. They were just annihilated by these people.
And they probably have their own tales and their own culture, and that just got appropriated into this one thing called the Bible.
A lot of these stories, maybe things like the talking donkeys, was borrowed from another culture and stuff like that.
Like the Noah's flood is borrowed from the epics of Gilgamesh.
Exactly.
There you go.
And they pinched stuff from the Egyptians and things like that. So, but when you look at the Bible as a mythology, it totally makes sense that the region and the history, it has roots, it has an evolution. Everything makes sense. It makes perfect sense of how this text evolves. What doesn't make sense is that this is the literal word of God and this is literally true. That is bizarre and a crazy anomaly. There are no such thing as talking donkeys.
Snakes.
Period.
Yeah.
And so, I've had plenty of arguments with people who are biblical literalists, and the only explanation that makes any sense whatsoever is that this is a mythological text crafted over hundreds of years. That's the only explanation. And passages like this highlight that. But these people aren't working on a rational level. They're working on a very emotional and psychological level. So you can't, it's very, very difficult to reason these people out of their beliefs.
Next page lists a bunch of offerings. You got the Sabbath offerings, you got the monthly offerings, so it's not enough. You got the Passover offerings, you got the Feast of Weeks, you got the Feast of Trumpets, you got the Feast of Booths. Oh my God, it goes on and on. Here it says on the fourth day, 10 bulls, 2 rams, 14 male lambs, a year old, without blemish. It's extremely detailed here. Yeah. But like you said on the previous page, the battle is just this 2 lines.
2 lines.
That's all.
So-and-so defeated so-and-so.
Yeah.
That's it. If I was a god, I would want all of my followers to always be bringing me stuff just as a sort of... It makes God seem crazy and egotistic. Like, he draws up these weird wish lists and say, I want 11 donkeys and 15 turtles, and you know, like, do all these strange, bizarre, complete these strange laundry lists just for my own satisfaction, for my own, just because I want to know. I don't need them.
Yeah.
I can make them, but I want to know how much you love me. I want to know how much you are really thinking about me, because, you know, even though I can see into your heart and read your mind.
Yeah.
If a woman vows to the Lord and binds herself by a pledge while within her father's house in her youth, and her father hears of her vow and of her pledge by which she has bound herself, and says nothing to her, then all her vows shall stand, and every pledge by which she has bound herself shall stand. But if her father opposes her on that day that he hears of it, no vows of hers, no pledge by which she has bound herself shall stand, and the Lord will forgive her because her father opposed her.
Like you said, patriarchal view of society. Again, it has to happen in the father's house, wink, wink.
Yep.
And if the father opposes her, then it's void.
Yep.
And yet no mention of the mother
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
So the mother's voice carries no weight.
We were saying before about the fingerprints of the Bible. This is another tell. When men congregate together and come up with systems of oppression, they invent systems of oppression that favor themselves. And this is a clear example of enshrining male power. The household is the microcosm of society, and the father as the head and the ultimate power of society.
That's how it was, right?
Yeah.
And it was like that for a very long time. And now we're see a shift in that. You see more and more women heads of household.
Yeah. And in political power, but you know, you're seeing recently the news about all this sexual misconduct in the news. You see these places like Hollywood and in Congress and in the church, where male-centric, male-dominated spaces become toxic, and they become places of abuse and of where crimes are committed and are swept under the rug. And so, you know, it's still going on. It's taking a long process of trying to introduce women into more places of power, where more places where, like, say, places like Congress or the Senate there should be more of a balance, less of these white old men.
I think Ron Moore, right?
Roy Moore.
Roy Moore, okay. So then there was Kevin Spacey's story. There were other stories. So there's one point especially I want to make here is people say, well, why do the stories come out now? And why does it take people so long to come out now? Well, the reason is because in our society, and that's very unfortunate, but that's the way it is, if a woman comes out and says, I was raped, she will be ashamed for that. A lot of women don't want to go through that, so they just stay quiet.
Yeah.
Or in India, I saw this crazy story. I think I shared it a few months ago. So what happened was there was a young kid, a boy, of course, who raped somebody in that village. So what's the logical connection? What's going to happen? He's going to go to jail, probably. His family's going to get a fine or something. No. What do? They instead, so he had a sister and the village elder. Yeah, we still have those these days in the 21st century. He ordered that the village raped her as a revenge.
The village?
Yeah.
My God. Your brother does something stupid.
Yeah.
Then the whole village rapes you.
Yeah, and he doesn't get any punishment whatsoever.
My God.
I'm not sure if that's true though, but it was a picture of the Women's Rights Council in some kind of Muslim country, like Saudi Arabia probably. Yeah, do you think there are any women on that panel?
No, it's exactly
zero.
Exactly the same in America, where they decide on the abortion rights, and it's just all white men.
Always men. Yeah. If her husband makes them null and void on the day that he hears them, then whatever proceeds out of her lips concerning her vows or concerning her pledge of herself shall not stand. Her husband has made them void. Well, that just kind of carries on from what we said about the father.
Exactly, yeah. So that's the lineage of oppression and how these systems perpetuate themselves. I guess that's why it's interesting that the husband, the father, has a choice over the husband. So he's essentially choosing who is my successor in the political system. And the proof is everywhere at the moment. Like every 5 minutes there's a new scandal and a new story.
Sure.
Matt Lauer of the Today Show had a secret button on his desk to lock his door. When people come in, he had a button here to lock the door people in, and he would sexually harass them and molest them.
Right.
And he did that for 20 years.
Yeah.
That's a male-dominated society, a male system with no checks and balances.
Some things are easy to change. You just have to have a very strong will for that. We could, in America, for example, have decided well before the election that, hey, you know what? When November comes, we're gonna all vote for Bernie Sanders. Let's decide that right now. Let's not deal with the fuckery that's gonna follow for the year of the primaries and all of that nonsense. Spending millions and millions of dollars on stupid ads on TV and radio. You know, you have to go to a town hall meeting. You have to pay for electricity of that. There's a whole bunch of expenses associated with
The whole
that.
economy.
Yeah, it's like a microeconomy. We could have decided that, but no. As far as I can see, humanity is absolutely incapable of sharp turns. It's always a very slow process. But when it is a sharp turn, it's most often violent. Like was the case with Hitler, like was the case with Mao, when he murdered millions of people that were just opposed to his system. Not even belief, but just the political system.
Yeah. A lot of people from the left are always talking about revolution and political, social revolution, but generally, if you look at history, the people who capitalize on revolution tend to be people from the right and the very far right.
And the rich. When I said before on my page that I think churches should be taxed, there are always some people who immediately attack me and they say, well, no, you can't do that because then they're going to be directly influenced in politics. But they already are. That's what you don't understand. They already are. I just shared an article by that sleazeball Ted Haggard. He was the 25th most influential person during like 2012 or 2008, I can't remember the year. This is already happening. He is a political, religious figure directly motivating his flock to vote a certain way. So, and he's not getting taxed for that. So it's like a win-win for him.
These religious institutions are going to be popping up everywhere, and they're going to be a way for people to launder money. It's going to be a nest of corruption, but also the political influence that religion will have in America will change that country. I mean, it'll be a radical revolution towards right-wing Christianity, and you know, I just think this is going to be catastrophic for. It's already pretty bad. People like Roy Moore, you know, he got fired from being a judge for the Ten Commandments, refusing to remove the Ten Commandments. These guys are outlaws. They don't care about the rules, and they're completely immoral. Obviously, sexually molesting children is outside of the bounds of normalcy. And they're about to be given free reign for political influence in America. If he gets elected, that's going to say a lot about the people's character in that state. I'm just saying. No. It's if you have a choice between a pedophile and a Democrat, then they choose the pedophile.
Right.
Better that than a Democrat, which you know lets you know what they think about Democrats. It's insane. Because the other guy, Doug Jones, he is a Christian too. You know, like, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Avenge the people of Israel on the Midianites."
I'm not sure how to read that.
Afterwards, you shall be gathered to your people. So Moses spoke to the people, saying, "Are men from among you for the war, that they may go against the Midian to execute the Lord's vengeance on Midian."
Different tribe.
Different tribe.
Same concept.
Same philosophy, same sort of Bronze Age way of thinking. I always think it's funny when God needs people to enact His will on earth. You see this with ISIS now. So we're going to, you know, defeat America for God, and it's sort of like, you know, how strong is your God? How strong is Allah if He needs ISIS to defeat America? I mean, I think that right-wing Christians in America have a stronger logical case to sort of say God is on their side because they are the largest economy and the biggest military force on the planet. But if you're in ISIS, I don't know what you're telling yourself.
A bunch of refugees flooded into Germany and other countries too. But what happened, of course, is that some ISIS members slipped in there as
Yeah, of
well.
course, yeah.
So that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, if I was ISIS, that would be absolutely what I would do.
Yeah,
It's a great back door, but you know, does that mean that you ignore all refugees? I mean, that's not very humane or sensible.
No. There's a question here that Moses asks: have you let all the women live? It's such a strange thing to ask.
To ask, yeah. By the way, you know, just asking.
Now, therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known man by lying with him. But all the young girls who have not known man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. Keep the young girls. It's to fuck, okay?
Yeah.
So that's disgusting. And also, how do you check if a woman, especially if you come from another tribe, there's no TV back then, no radio, you don't know those people. This is the first time you enter their city or whatever. So how do you know this woman or this woman is a virgin or not? We know even today that you can't tell the difference unless the woman admits.
Yeah, or you're a doctor and you can examine their hymen or something.
Right. And it breaks on its own, by the way.
Yeah, exactly,
That's the bottom line.
That's not
so
proof.
you can't tell just by that. So I like this guy because he goes out to people, but there's two important points here. First, he goes to Tokyo. And so it's a big difference when you talk to people in a big metropolis and some kind of farm, rural area, right? So that's already one. And the other thing, he's only asking a few people, so you can't generalize from that tiny sample, really. I mean, what is like 6 or 8 people in Tokyo, the city that has 20 million people, okay? And also all of them are young. Again, so their opinions are going to be very different, probably, from older generation. So just bear that in mind as you watch this video.
Since 2016, the voting age in Japan is 18, and since there's a general election coming up this month, I asked young people if they are interested in politics.
いやー、あんまないっすね、俺は。いやー、僕もないですね。あるよ。
ないです。
いやいやいやいや。
それはなぜですか？
難しいからです。あんまり自分に関係ないかなって。あるから。
I think we both agree that we were both not interested in politics at the age of 18 or 19.
No. I grew up in, Adelaide, which is a very small town in Australia. So Australian politics is boring at the best of times. But I wasn't thinking about politics when I was a teenager. That's for sure.
So let's just say that's a common thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one guy, he said it's difficult, and I agree. Politics, when you actually dig into it, deep into it, it's really complicated, and the bills are hundreds and hundreds of pages. Like the tax bill they just had in America was, I think, nearly 500 pages, and they didn't even have time to read all of that. No. So, but what I disagree though is this young guy. He says, I feel it doesn't have anything to do with me. Well, that's just a fallacy right there. You would perhaps like to live in a world with no responsibility and just in your kind of bubble, but unfortunately we live in a society where you have to interact with other people. Politics, though, whether you like it or not, it decides our lives.
If there was a war with North Korea, then that would certainly affect him a lot, dramatically. I mean, he is, like I say, if he's very, very young, then he's probably is living in a bubble created by his parents, where he does feel like he's not, things don't affect him and he's not responsible for certain things, but you quickly grow out of that mentality. I've spoken to some younger people, and they don't really understand political ramifications, even in small things like purchasing the things that you buy every day, or, the companies that you support financially. All this minutiae, it's all politics. Politics is it's in everything. It's in social media and in your day-to-day life that you wouldn't necessarily think about. Probably give this kid maybe another 10 years. Maybe he'll start to form some opinions.
In my teens, I was not the sharpest tool in the shed at all. I wish I were a little bit better. I wish I were more interested in certain topics. So do you think, what I'm trying to say is that, do you think younger people should kind of grow up a little bit earlier these days?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it probably has something to do with the education system. Maybe they should have politics education, maybe even in high school or something like that. So not necessarily just sort of get the gears rolling in their head, so they're starting to thinking about these sort of things.
動画をちょっと見るくらいですね、僕は。YouTube とかで。普通に国会の中継のダイジェストとかたまに見たりします。
知らなきゃいけないかなとは思ってますけど
I should know more, but I always like those people who say that sentence. Well, I'm against pedophilia, but you know there's trouble coming right in the next sentence there. And also this guy, again, referring to the YouTube videos. Well, if you talk to a flat earther, he also watches a lot of YouTube videos. So what?
Yeah, which YouTube videos are you watching? I mean, that makes a huge difference.
This one time, their top story was this car that crashed into a post in some remote village.
Yeah.
What, that's it? That's the best you got? There's like literally nothing else going on. This was the only car crash that day?
Maybe large issues like the retirement of the emperor, or like we were saying before about the changing the constitution to become a more aggressive army, but basic day-to-day stuff is not talked about so much.
あんまりなんか朝早くて夜遅い帰るの遅いとニュースも見ないしほとんど知らない
As long as you work a certain amount of hours every day, you don't have time later to go back and stuff like that. In Japan, people work a lot of overtime hours, so they sometimes start very early and come back really late in the evening. Do you really think that this guy or this woman is gonna, I don't know, read some research after 12 hours at work? No, it's just not gonna happen.
I think that's sort of like by design, maybe. Like I think it's a really negative aspect of a society where leisure time for the citizens is really, really important for these reasons. In a functioning democracy, you need to have opinions about the politics. You have to be an informed voter. That's a part of being a democracy. So having a system where you just work your citizens into the ground and they have no free time to think for themselves, that's a very nefarious kind of oppression, I think.
選ぶ権利がある以上行くのが筋かなっていう、なんか普通にまあ人それぞれですけどね。
誰に入れたらいいか、全く分かんない
There are 7 main parties and there are 4, well, really tiny parties, let's say. They don't even have representatives actually, but they're listed as parties. So, okay, like roughly in total you got 11 parties, and of course the leader right now is the LDP party. Interesting thing about Japan though is that the Democratic Party here is the one that's vilified the most. And they're the ones who did the bad stuff for decades. There's also a large communist influence in Japan that comes from China. And so there's a lot of like suspicion here, and there's also religious cults here with a lot of influence.
Yeah, it's an interesting bag when you start to look into it. Everyone kind of looks like the same, but when you start to research it, there's a lot going on in politics. I think Japan had a very strong left-wing government in the 60s and 70s and stuff like that, but recently it started to trend towards more conservative policies and politics. You know, and you know, with some that causes tension in the region, obviously, because people like Abe will go to certain shrines where war criminals are buried.
So in America, you know, when you go to the supermarket, you have maybe 25 choices of cereal. You want to buy a shirt or a coat, you have 30, 40, 50 different kinds of jackets. But yet, for some reason, when it comes to the political system, we're just fine with 2, which really are 1 in America, because both are owned by the same corporations, and the difference is not so much in their policies, but in the degree of their craziness. One party is just batshit insane, and the other party is less insane. But still controlled by the same interests.
Yeah. I mean, like in the 2016 election, if it had been a choice between Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton, I mean, what's the difference between those 2 politicians? They're basically the same. And I think that's why these outliers like Trump and Bernie Sanders became more popular in that, because people were just sick of voting for the same politicians all the time. In Australia, it's compulsory to vote. You get fined if you don't go to the voting booths. But still, so there's a high turnout. There's a high percentage of people, like 90% of the people vote. But there is a still sort of people don't want to vote, or people are probably because they're forced to.
Yeah.
But I think it's really good that these kids, even though they're not so interested in politics, they still feel a responsibility to go vote.
行くことは行くけど、ニュースで見てなんとなくこの人でいいかなって感じで。
Again, what news are we watching? Because in America, if you're watching Fox News, or MSNBC for that matter, because both are really propaganda tanks at this point, you're not going to get the real story. We talked about that on the last show. I asked Jeremy, how do you know these days what's true or not? Because we're swamped with information.
In this day and age, you can choose your own reality. So politics and political information isn't about institutions trying to influence your opinion. They're offering you a smorgasbord of things, and you can choose which ones you decide to believe. And there's a lot of places like Breitbart and some far right organizations out there on the internet, or like Alex Jones, who just peddle in bizarre conspiracy theories, but people just decide what they're going to believe. If you can provide facts to contradict this, it doesn't really matter because your facts are tainted. Your facts come from MSNBC. My facts comes from Alex Jones.
Sure.
So I've just made that decision to believe that person, and I'm going to stubbornly believe that.
Yeah.
And that's how informed voters operate in this modern era. It's heading towards a disaster.
There's this famous girl band, AKB48. It's a band of 48 girls, young girls. They're all singing, and it's, in my opinion, I really hate that kind of music anyway. But they had a music clip a while ago where they dressed up in a kind of almost Nazi-looking uniform. So of course that was outrageous for the people here. I understand, these girls, they are not intelligent, probably. I understand that they would wear this uniform without questioning. But the people who made that video, they knew exactly what they were doing.
Oh, yeah. This is the otaku culture. Like, it's the same thing that's happening in America. Steve Bannon realized that these disgruntled online men, young men playing video games, lonely, have aggressive or negative attitudes towards women, can be cultivated into a political movement or political force.
These are guys in Tokyo who drive around in those black trucks. You might have seen them because you work there.
Yeah.
And they just basically shout racial slurs. And the funny thing is, they're not even racially Japanese, these guys who are doing it. They're like Koreans or something.
Yeah, anti-Korean protests as
Oh,
well.
yes.
Because like I where I work near Koreatown in Okubo, and sometimes you'll see protests there, and they'll just drive up in front of Korean establishments, Korean restaurants or businesses, and just with their loudspeakers just abuse the Korean owners. It's intense, but these people have rallies. It's like less than 100 people. I mean, they're a big voice, but they're a small presence.
自民党？
自民党ですかね。
自民党しかもはやわからない。
For her, it's all a joke. It's not serious at all. She laughs about everything like an idiot. I lived in the Philippines and I saw people treat politics this way there. For them, it's a joke. That's why there is Manny Pacquiao in the government, who's a fucking boxer, who's a religious nutbag, who thinks gay people are inferior. Why is he even in that position of power? Because of people like that who just think it's a joke. It would be funny to have that guy in the government. And then guess what? He wins because a lot of people have the same mentality. And then the country's screwed. There's other examples of famous actors there who, again, have no experience in politics, who have gained position of power.
Duterte? How do you say his name?
Duterte. I think,
Duterte? Yeah, that guy, he's like overseas, he's characterized as a nutbag and a psychopath and a murderer.
Yeah.
But in the Philippines, he's incredibly popular.
Yes.
He has insane popularity numbers.
These people who are commenting on Filipino politics, do they really I mean, have they lived in the Philippines ever? Do they actually know anybody else than the president right now? Or do they just read some article on CNN, which, by the way, is extremely biased? Just like MSNBC, just like Fox News, all of them will give you a version of story. I call it selective outrage because they create those stories for 5 minutes and the people get riled up for those 5 minutes, and then because the attention span is so short these days, they need another story to jump to, so they jump to another story, which makes them outraged. So Kevin Spacey was like the main news for 5 minutes, and after that, whoop, to the side, let's talk about some other story we want you to get angry about. In my opinion, I will say I don't know, because I don't know Duterte. I don't know really what's going there. I don't follow the news. If the majority of locals support him, well, there must be a disconnect right there then between the Western media and what happens in the Philippines.
Absolutely.
北朝鮮とかもっと仲良くなるようにしてほしい。
The system of government that they have in North Korea, you need an enemy, you need an outside force to regulate the power inside the country. It's very difficult for North Korea to create a solution, a real solution, because then that will sort of invalidate their revolution and the hardships that they go through, because they're trying to keep the wolves at bay, so to speak. So you can talk, of course you can talk to North Korea, but realistically, there's not going to be any long-term solution made.
なんか自分たちの世代は、なんか50とか60定年迎えた時にちょっと大変になるみたいなの聞いてるんで、そういう年金とかがちゃんともらえれば別に不満はないですね。
He's very young, and he's already thinking about his pension. I mean, I'm in my mid-30s, and even I don't really think about the pension still.
No, not me either.
But that guy is much younger than me, and yet it seems to me the only concern that he brought up so far anyway.
The guy before that was talking about jobs after he leaves
Yeah.
school and stuff like that. So these are people just, things that they affect them and that they care about. I agree, it's kind of a bit early to be worrying about the pension. North Korea is more of, there's not going to be any pension if there's a nuclear war,
This is interesting to me that he even talks about that. It means that your society is in this kind of very steady phase, so that you can actually plan 50, 60 years ahead in the future. People did that. People did that in the 60s and the 70s. But people can't afford to do that these days at all.
No, even perhaps my mother's generation, she was able to do that, plan her life out. Now is living her retirement according to her plan. But I can't imagine. I don't plan that far ahead. 5 years ahead, maybe. Or
ちょっと日本変わりすぎてるんで、いろんな人になってるんで。
ずっと同じ人がやってた方がいいのかなと思います。
どうですか、安倍さん。
それは本当にそう思いますね。
The people in this video talk about the status quo and things not changing and things being more settled. I think that even if you're not ethical or moral politician, you can get away with a lot just by providing a sense of stability and calm.
Yeah.
And people will just naturally gravitate to it, especially people who don't follow the news. He seems to be doing, everything seems to be okay, I'll just vote for him, and you can sort of gather popularity that way just by providing a status quo.
Yeah.
He could be gassing people for we know, but
Yeah.
like if he just keeps things on the steady, like maybe people in Hitler's Germany thought that, like before the economy was up and down, but now we seem to be doing pretty well. So
That's right. Yeah.
So I'll just leave it up to Hitler. He seems to be doing it all right.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's very possible.
現状維持だね。
現状維持も別に加えてほしいことはない。
ないですね、僕は。
ないです。ないです。年金もらえるか不安なんですけど。
でも年金
は本当に
欲しいな。不満、住民税ちょっと高えなと思いますね。
平和に暮らせれば私はそれでいい。確かに。戦争とかがなければ、このままでもいいかなって思います。
自分たちが年取った時に暮らしやすいようにしてほしいなと思います。
政治家の人数を減らしてほしい。その分で僕たちの税金結構持って帰っちゃう面ある。
あるとは思うんですけど、やっぱりなんか戦争とかそういうのだけは起こしてほしくないなと思います。なんとかして。
A lot of issues these days about gay rights or like, you know, religious freedoms, immigration
Pay
bans.
equality, sure.
Pay
yeah.
equality, yeah, like for women.
Yeah.
All these things don't affect me. I'm not a Muslim. I'm not,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not gay or a woman. But that next step in political thinking, where you're not just thinking about your own. A lot of these people is like, well, as long as I have a nice life, a long peaceful life, I don't really care so much.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit short-sighted. It's interesting to be in Tokyo right now. I sort of feel like my fate is hanging in the balance
Right.
between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump.
Right.
I gotta rely on these two numbskulls to make a good decision.
While many expected the low favorability ratings of the two candidates and the divisiveness of this election year to keep young voters home, 2016 saw similar rates of young adult turnout as 2012. On election day, Hillary Clinton won the youth vote, 55%, while Donald Trump only gathered the support of 37%. Of the millennial electorate, comparatively in 2012, young adults voted for Barack Obama over Mitt Romney by about the same percentage, actually.
But it seems like maybe in America, you know, maybe they're quite a politically minded population. I know that in certain places, like in the more rural areas, you have like the religious colleges, and they have the young conservative movement. So they probably have an infrastructure there that's being funded by billionaires to sort of recruit the next generation of political voters. Possibly.
Just like with religion, right? I mean, you're born into a religion. It's hard to get out of it.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
here they're born into this political system.
Yeah.
The interesting graph here, it shows the level of trust among millennials by race and ethnicity. And the only one I'm interested in here right now especially is the major news media. So you'll notice that among the white people, only 17% trust the media. From the African American, 18%, Latino, 20%. Nobody trusts the mass media, yet everybody loves to quote from CNN immediately once you start some debate, or they try, where do they find their numbers from? They find it from these organizations. So it's funny, they don't trust them, and yet they will quote them.
On that graph, that's some of the lowest numbers on there. Like, at best, 20% of the population believes that the news media. You know, that's one of the pillars of a democracy, of a healthy democracy, is to have a free and open news outlets that can report on things. That's how the voter gets their information. And if there's a disconnect between the messenger and the receiver, then there's something broken in your democracy. Places like CNN, they want the clicks, so it's all clickbaity nonsense now, and like you said, outrage porn
and war. CNN loves to promote war. How many articles I saw? Hey, let's talk about this missile.
They got their big break on the first Gulf War. That's when they got really big, and they probably saw those numbers, and it's like, you know, war's good for business.
Industrial military complex budget.
Yeah.
Trump just boosted it by $80 billion.
Today we can't afford healthcare.
Yeah.
Healthcare's off the table, but you know, the media is this big sort of fuzzy word. It just covers a lot of things. So if you sort of say, do you trust Fox News? I mean, you know, as a sort of more of a left-leaning person, I would be skeptical of places like Fox News or RT or places like that might seem more mainstream. So that might affect the numbers too. People trust their news outlets, but they don't trust the other news outlets.
If you enjoy our show, then please support it on Patreon, and we have a shop also, so please get shirts and mugs and pillow covers and all of that. Anyway, so from both of us, I know it's a bit early, but advanced Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.